Hey guys, this is Levi. I'm here with Don't Panic Media Group. Today we're going to try something a little bit new, a little bit different. I wanted to actually kind of just start trying just a general informational podcast. Just going over some basic things that you might encounter when you're working with your internet. So, well, that'll be what our first series will be. So, today we're going to start off with one that plagues most people. And most people it's usually a nightmare for, and that would be intermittent disconnects. Now, the type of service you have can vary as far as what you experience and what you may have, and we'll go over that later. But an intermittent disconnect is essentially you lose your connection, it goes out for a period of time, it comes back, it happens again, and it becomes extremely irritating because it can be as simple as, it maybe happens, 4 or 5 times per day, to it happens every 30 seconds, to it happens 3 times a day for the course of 3 weeks. Now, some of these can actually be caused by issues out in the field. Many of them tend to be issues with the modem. These are things we will go over. So, as I mentioned before, there are different types of disconnects, and what can be the cause can vary based off of the type of service you have. Now, what the field techs in the field will find, that can vary as well. I'll be honest, that is a little bit beyond even my own expertise. I won't go over that, but I will go over some of the things you can expect to find. So, first things first, a lot of people out there have DSL internet. And for those of you who do, I apologize. DSL is not the greatest of connection types. It's very, it's range-based, so the further away you are from the main hubs, the worse the connection will become. Typically, if you're over 4 miles from the main hub, you're probably going to get disconnects on average, and there's really not going to be a whole lot of fixes for it. If you're past 5 miles, honestly, don't even sign up for it. At that point, it's not worth it. And as much as I even hate to say this, satellite would be even better than that, even dial-up. It'll be a lot more stabler. But DSL disconnects, there's two. Well, with any kind of connection, there's three. There's one that has to do with power. But then with DSL, there's what's called an intermittent sync and an intermittent route. So intermittent sync is basically the loss of the actual DSL signal coming to the modem. So this can be the modem. More than likely, it's the physical problem on the line or at the hub. It could also be inside wiring. Never assume that your problem is not inside wiring. Likelihood is it isn't, because if you think about it, there's thousands and thousands of feet of line outside your home versus a couple hundred feet inside. So the likelihood is still it's going to be outside, but don't ever assume anything there, because I've seen cases where it seemed like it was outside and then it ended up being inside. The next one, like I said, is intermittent route. Intermittent route is basically, it's usually a failure for the server side. The server itself isn't talking correctly. DSL uses what's called a PPP over Ethernet, or point-to-point protocol, which essentially means that it is having to log into the server. Therefore, the information is either incorrect within the modem, which normally should actually cause you to have no route, but in some rare cases can actually cause it to be intermittent, or there's a problem on the server. Intermittent route usually is a fairly easy fix. They'll usually have it fixed within 24 hours, but it does require a trouble ticket, just like intermittent sync. Now, there's also cable. Cable's the probably second most available option out there. Now, cable internet, it's actually a lot more straightforward. Cable uses what's called DHCP, which means there is no server logins. Everything is just backhandled. You reboot your modem, that's pretty much it. Now, there's not a whole lot of troubleshooting that need to be done there from the modem side. However, with intermittent connections with cable, it really comes down to modem or line. Rarely is it a server issue. Servers tend to really not play a huge part. Like I said, they don't really handle a whole lot. Even the modem itself will usually have what's called a boot file in it, which is what tells the modem what it needs to get speed-wise. Now, one thing that can cause intermittent connections on any type of connection is wireless, and we'll go over that as a final relay, because this is actually, wireless disconnects are usually what plagues the majority of people. Going forward, though, with the types of signals that you can have, types of internet connections, we'll combine the next two together. You've got fiber to the home, otherwise known as FTTH, and fiber to the curb, known as FTTC. Now, you may be thinking, what's the difference? Basically, fiber to the curb is literally a fiber line that goes and terminates out at literally the curb and then goes by coax into your home. Now, these connections usually is where you'll see like the 500 meg down, 100 meg up, things of that nature. Fiber to the home tends to be, and forgive me for misusing this term if I did, please notate it in the comments, synchronous speeds, where you'll get 500 up, 500 down. These are obviously the better of the connections that you're going to want, but not everybody out there has these. Typically, you're going to find this with Google Fiber, and I'm trying to think of some of the other names they've just kind of skipped through. But anywhere you see gigabit service, make sure you check the fine print, because if it says 940, that is not fiber. That is still cable. That's DOCSIS 3.1. Do not confuse that with fiber. Then lastly is satellite. And I kind of skipped over a little bit on the fiber. Fiber really, to be honest, you're not really going to experience too many problems there. Again, most of the problems that cause disconnects at that point are usually going to be on the modem, because majority of fiber lines, unless something really damaging happens, in the case that actually happened to me was an actual airplane crash. Literally crashed in midair, damaged the equipment from falling debris. For the most part, you're not going to have too many problems with that. Now, like I mentioned, next one is satellite. Satellite's not the greatest of connections. To be honest, unless you're a general user, like just basically browsing the internet, checking your emails, maybe doing a video chat here and there, honestly, it's the worst type of connection you can have outside of dial-up, because it's very, very, very dependent on the signal from the towers to your equipment, and even from the satellite up in space down to the towers and to your equipment. So if you have a storm within your area, it could be literally right on top of you and not cause you any problems. But if it's next to you, it's more likely to cause you problems, because it's actually going to be preventing that signal from going through. Remember, it's not straight up in the air. It goes diagonally to the tower, and we'll let it focus. Okay. So satellite, one of the first things you'll usually be asked is, what's the weather like? And it's not necessarily the weather that's the problem. Like, you might not have any storms or anything out. It's the cloud cover. It's the visibility. Generally speaking, 8 miles of visibility is too little. You'll usually still have good enough service, but pretty much if you're at between 8 and 10 or even less, you're probably going to have either an intermittent connection problem or no internet at all. Dial-up we won't really go over, because to be honest, it's not used anymore. There might be 1 in a million that have dial-up out there now. It's just that. It's slow. It uses a phone line. It takes up a phone port. It's not really viable. Anybody who has that, I highly recommend switching to satellite if that's your only other option. DSL at the very least. Like I said, if you're too far away from one of the main hubs, don't bother, go satellite. But if you're within 4 miles, I would go with DSL. Or if you have a cable option, go with cable. Symptoms of disconnects can be just losing those lights on the modem, going out. Those are the biggest key indicators. Check your modem. If you just lost your connection, look at your modem. Most modems have lights on them. Some may have a single light that will have multiple functionalities. Some will have 5 to 10 lights. Specifically, the ones you're going to look for with DSL, it'll say DSL, internet. With cable, it'll usually say US, DS, online. These are the online USDS. Those are the ones to look for cable. DSL, it's DSL and online, DSL and internet. These can be indicators of what the problem is, and of course the power. Like I said, if the power light's going out, you've got a faulty power cord, or you've got a faulty jack in your home of some sort. Replace the modem first. Then, if it's still happening, get an electrician in. With the USDS on the cable, to be honest, regardless if it's USDS or online, let your technician know that it's on the phone with you, because these are big key indicators of what's happening. It's showing proof that it is happening. They may not be able to see it right away, since again it is intermittent, so it may be working at that moment. Make sure if they can, run historical plots to see what's been happening in the past. Most techs will be able to get a technician out there based off of that information, though. DSL, most DSL companies also have a way of checking historicals. They'll call it typically radius or radius entries, and these basically are indicative of disconnects on the line. More than 5, and it's a ticket. Most companies. Satellite, I haven't worked enough with, but generally speaking, like I said, if they're showing disconnects, they'll see it, and they'll send a tech out. But most satellite companies do charge you for tech visits, so be mindful of that. Make sure there's no cloud cover. Make sure there's no storms before you call on it. Save yourself the time and the energy, because that's likely the cause. Fiber to the home, fiber to the curb. Pretty much reboot your equipment if you have basically what's called a fiber modem, which is only going to be used for fiber to the curb. Outside of that, reseat your fiber line. You have a fiber line coming into your home that usually goes into a router. Reseat it, unplug it, plug it back in. As crazy as that sounds, that can fix a fiber line issue. Again, now we'll go over the final thing that we do see a lot in tech support, which is intermittent disconnects only happening on the Wi-Fi. You'll know this is the case when all your devices are wireless. And I hate to say it like that. The world has not completely switched to wireless. And I know a lot of people, you can go into the store, you're going to see, wireless this, wireless that. Here's, Internet of Things. You can use wireless anywhere you want. And while, yes, there are certain things that are meant for that, it's typically ultra portability, tablets, phones, extremely ultra thin laptops. They're not meant for your main staple device, your main use. So if you're going to be using it for general purpose, like sitting at a table using it, try to hardwire. Make sure your computer does have an Ethernet port. If it does not, you can go to places like Amazon and Walmart and find what's called a USB to Ethernet adapter. It gives you basically Ethernet access through the USB ports. They're not expensive. They're like $15-$20. Highly recommend to have one no matter what, even as a backup. You may have a desktop computer and that port fails. You'll still have that as a backup you can use. But as far as wireless itself goes, like I said, if all your devices are wireless, you have no way of hardwiring, those lights are going to be key, because if those lights aren't going off and they're staying solid, then you've got a wireless disconnect issue. And there's several things that could be going wrong here. You could have signal interference. You could have a range issue. The range itself on a modem, on a gateway that you get either from your ISP, or if you went out and bought your own router or bought your own gateway, antennas wear out. Time will wear those out, and they will get weaker and weaker with time. The biggest thing I can tell you as far as those situations go, if you are buying your own, make sure to buy one with external antennas, because if that's the case, you can always replace your antennas later on down the road. However, if your router becomes over 3 years old, I would say just go out and buy a new one. At that point, it's not worth the money of replacing antennas, and there's usually better technology out at that point. So the money you might that little extra money you might spend will actually net you a little bit extra potential. But Wi-Fi, as a general rule, is going to disconnect. It's not a perfect connection. It's not meant to be. It's never claimed to be. There's two typical broadcasts you're going to see, which is a 2.4 and a 5.0. 2.4 is meant for distance. It's the connection that is going to get the better range. I could say your experience will vary based off of your equipment, based off of the area you live in. If you live in an apartment complex, just say screw 2.4. I'm going to be honest with you guys there. 2.4 is absolutely going to be trash in an apartment, because you're going to be having everybody else in that apartment with that same type of broadcast all broadcasting together. I use this all the time with my customers. Imagine the old cordless phones when you pick them up and you could hear a radio in the background, or you might hear another person on the phone. That's the exact same broadcast we're getting with the 2.4 gigahertz on the Wi-Fi. So instead of that noise that you're hearing over the phone, that's noise of the signal disruption. So that same noise is still going to affect your Wi-Fi. So imagine just a giant blob of people with Wi-Fi around you, and they're all just mingling. There are channels, there's channels 1 through 11. Generally speaking, 1, 6, and 11 are going to be the ones you're going to want to try to aim for. But if you have 6 devices near you on each of those channels, it's not going to be a good connection. And it's not going to be fast by any means, even if you weren't in an apartment. Average speeds for 2.4 wireless is about 30 to 40 megabits per second. Obviously, if you pay for less than that speed wise, you're going to get less than that. But even myself, like I used to have a 500 meg internet connection on fiber. My PS4 was only getting 6 megs down. Wired was getting about 50. That was actually a limitation of the device, not as much of the speeds. But you could put a laptop right above that PS4, run those same speed tests on the 2.4, get it 30 to 40. And so there are devices out there that can get faster. Like you've got iPhone 10s, iPhone 8s. These are the ones I typically see. There's obviously, you probably find them with Android phones as well, that will probably get faster on the 2.4. But again, the closer you are to the modem, the better those speeds are going to be. I want to tell you guys that the age of the device also doesn't necessarily mean anything. Now, I do work for Comcast right now, so one of the documents we do have on the back end is actually a list of devices that have been tested. Now, the document is actually meant for gigabit, but it obviously plays a part for every speed plan below that for many of these devices, because these are the max that they're actually able to capture over these speeds. So the PS4 Pro, and don't 100% quote me on this because I'm going based off of memory here, I believe had a max of 98 on the 5.0 network. Whereas a MacBook Pro 2015 actually scored about 30 megs higher than the MacBook Pro 2016. So, and we're talking 400, I think it was like 396 for the 2016 and 435 for the 2015. So the age doesn't necessarily play a huge part. Even devices themselves, like you can have one Samsung device that you bought that's a Samsung S8 and another Samsung S8, same room, same location, getting varying speeds. And again, hardware is different. Every piece of hardware is different. A term that gets used a lot in computer gaming is called the silicon lottery. You know, everything's different when it comes out of that factory. Nothing is 100% the exact same. So don't expect the exact same speeds on every device. But if you want speeds, you need to be in the 5. And the downside, again, like I said, to the 5 is it's short range. So if you're within about 20 feet of the modem, you'll probably be able to connect to that 5. Past that, or depending on the amount of walls you're passing through, it's going to be negligible. And the further away, again, you get, the weaker the signal is going to become. Therefore, more disconnects are going to happen. Again, there are channels you can choose from, a lot more range of channels, so it's a lot better, like I said, for apartments. And because it's a shorter range, you don't have to worry about as many neighbors competing with you with that network connection. But not all devices are compatible. And again, some newer devices, you know, that's one thing that manufacturers can sometimes save money on. So you could have a brand new Galaxy Samsung J3. It does not have 5.0 network capability. It has 2.4 only. That being said, you're on a cell phone. You don't need 100 megs on a cell phone. Anybody who tells you otherwise does not know what they're talking about. A cell phone, typically speaking, if you're downloading a very high-end game, like for instance, we'll go with PUBG Mobile, the faster the speeds you can get on it, the better, just for that download. Once it's downloaded, it's negligible. I mean, technically, gaming-wise, if you have at least 3 megs, you're fine. You're never going to have a problem. So, again, speeds when it comes to cell phones really doesn't play a huge part. And even those larger filed games are still not so large that you can't just download them off of a 30 to 40 meg connection. They'll download very quickly still. You probably have it done within about 15, 20 minutes. I mean, if you're not that patient, I'm sorry for you. But intermittent connections, like I said, they are the worst. You know, they're going to be the biggest aggravation. And even for the Philtechs, they're going to go out, they're going to work your line, they're going to do everything they can to fix it. Think they have a fix and leave, marking you as complete. Go about their day, and your internet connection isn't fixed. You're still going down. You know, it may have seemed fixed at first, but it's just still going. Best thing you can do is call back in. If you don't call back in, they don't know. You know, they need to be aware that these things are still happening. So, you know, don't expect them to know that it's happening. Don't blame them either. Because, yeah, I can understand blaming them after like 2 to 3 tries. Because at that point, you know, come on, guys. You've got to have found something by that point. I usually give them 3 tries before I start getting angry about it. But they're not the easiest to fix. Usually a tech will usually do two things. They'll do everything out at the tap, at the line, up to the what's called the NID, which is the network interface device outside your home. And oftentimes, they'll check and test your lines from there into the home. If you're home, they'll replace your modem just in case that's the problem. And if everything seems to be running smoothly and they haven't seen any drops while they've been working on it, they're going to close it up and leave. And thinking that the modem fixed it, or, whatever they did on that modem or on that line worked. But call back. If it's within a lot of companies, if it's within a certain period of time, they can do what's called a truck rollback, where they send a technician back out same day. And it's usually that same tech, so he already knows what he's done, and it makes this job a bit easier. The longer you wait, the longer the possibility that they miss something the next time. And that's why, like I said, that's why they're a nightmare. And like I said, they're not just a nightmare for you, they're a nightmare for everybody involved. And I promise that whoever you get when you call in, they are going to try to do their best to help you. I say that. We've all had those experiences, but worst case scenario, ask for a supervisor. Don't be afraid to. Most supervisors usually aren't skilled in tech support anymore. But at the very least, you asking is going to get that tech usually either communicating with that supervisor to get a better assistance done, or they're going to be like, oh, I didn't do my job. Let me do my job now. So asking for a supervisor is not a bad thing. Not getting one isn't necessarily bad either, as long as they do their job at that point. So if they're like, oh, you know what, I figured this out. Let's try this real quick. That's usually what that means. There can be just the general, they asked their supervisor, didn't, forgot to do something. It happens to the best of us. We're all human. And realize, oh, I forgot to do that. Oops. And they'll get that resolved. So again, call. It's the best thing you can do. Watch those lights, notate which ones go out, and then call us and let us know. So we can get that, well, I say we. Like I said, work for Comcast. So, we'll do everything we can to get it fixed for you. But no matter what your ISP is, that should be what they're thinking as well. Because the thing is, if they can get you fixed, you're not calling back. They don't have to worry about you being upset because you're fixed. So that's the biggest concern most techs have, is just an upset customer. But, bear with them, be patient, and they'll do what they can. Well, that's it for tonight's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm calling it a podcast. It's more informational, but we're going to go ahead and get this edited up and put up onto YouTube tonight. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good night and enjoy. And I said that again.